Welcome to an episode of the Unexpected Podcast. We are in for a very exciting episode, in my opinion. My name is Alisher, and I am in Pennsylvania, outside of the Philadelphia area, and I am joined by Matt and Evan, who are both in the Boston area. I'm joined with Rainier, who's still schmoozing with the Dutch, uh, Devin, who is in Baltimore, and we are joined by a special guest, John, from the Any Heroics podcast. Sorry, John, I don't exactly know where in England you live.
Yeah, no worries. So I live in Cambridge, England, so a little bit above London for anyone that doesn't know.
Okay, there you go. And we are bringing you all a very special episode. It is about a week, maybe a little plus. No, I guess just a week straight from the Nations Cup, which was a very large international grand tournament that took place in Antwerp, Belgium, over June 1st and 2nd. It was, I believe, 15 countries were represented, but ultimately 20 teams for 120 players. It was a six-round event that had what I found was a very interesting or unique from my experiences draft good versus evil drafting system. So each team was comprised of six people. Three had to play good, three had to play evil. And in the process, or each round of the tournament, the team captains for each team figured out and established drafted pairings for the tables to effectively try to set up ideal matches. Fortunately, many of just the majority of Team USA this year was comprised of unexpected podcast hosts. So everyone here was in attendance and will be able to share something throughout the duration of the episode. But John also was there representing as a part of England too. Is that right?
Yeah, so we were unofficially England too, officially the Lions. So probably the lesser tier players, whereas the first England team snapped up all the best players.
Okay. All right. And John provided us with some various statistics, but before we get into that, I kind of just want to quickly, if we can, go around and just one highlight from the tournament because this is a very unique setting. We've talked about Articon in the past, but Articon has a different format entirely, is in a different country. So if we can just quickly go around and just one highlight from the tournament. I didn't mention, but this was also the very first year that they were holding this tournament. So it was a very interesting and exciting time. So I'm gonna just very quickly flip it over to Rainier. Do you have a quick highlight from the tournament?
Yeah, I guess the highlight, well, we put together a team. I wouldn't say that all of us are the most competitive players in the US. It was more so like, hey, who lives in Europe and who can make it to Europe? When we comprised our team, it wasn't the typical best of the best. But yeah, I think a highlight for me is regardless of how competitive it was, everyone was really nice. Um, all the countries we went through, and we played Switzerland, when we played Germany, when we played Belgium and these different groups here and there, like it was just a nice, I guess, feel because you would expect that everyone was really serious and trying to take the tournament too seriously and too competitive, but actually everyone was a gentleman. All the games that I had out of all the six, I just had a nice time. So yeah, I guess the highlight for me was like, yeah, it was nice.
Okay, Devin, do you have a quick highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I won't let my tournament experience be soured by the fact that my team had me pick a list that I was horrible with. And then
That's
With
promptly,
your
madness.
full consent, I might add.
It's the
because of
plan.
In
because
fairness,
of the
Devin, you're not an
concern,
easy person to set up with a.
But not only that, he's also the person who is like, yeah, I'll play anything. I can't be bothered to come up
you
with a
know,
list. Sure, just
I
give
have
it to
learned
me.
my lesson. Matt is right. I do say I'll play anything, and I learned I'm so bad with this list. I should never play with this again. But no, you know what? Despite probably the worst six-round performance I've ever done in my life, I had a good time. Actually, Rainier's right. The players were not like overly competitive at all. In fact, a lot of times with another event called, I think the ETC, I don't know, run by a completely different group, but that's always what I've heard is like kind of the overly aggressive nature. But not a single game did I play where I felt like there was slow play involved or some kind of shenanigan or whatnot. Honestly, I felt like everyone was being a really good sport about it. And I mean, even when it got really, really, really close, it in a lot of games actually. Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that. Plus, number two, and hats off to the refs. Thank God you guys had enough refs. I never felt like it was difficult to go get a judge if I needed a judge calling, and that's a different experience from some events where it's massive and I can't find a judge anywhere. So I definitely appreciate that.
Fair enough. John, you're
As
next up on
someone
my screen.
who, sorry to butt in, as someone who's played in both the WTC and the Nations Cup in relatively quick succession this year, I can concur with Devin's statement. I don't know why necessarily it felt like that, but I had a couple of, I'd say, not overly pleasant games at the WTC, whereas all 6 of my games at this event were very lovely.
Could it be the organizers? Oh, never mind.
Wow, and here, cheese.
And shots fired.
And moving
Really?
along.
And next person.
Moving swiftly on, my highlights
Yeah.
was probably just mixing with different groups, different kind of cultures, both kind of seeing the game from a different point of view, and also just meeting people from a different place in the world, like meeting some of you guys, seeing kind of how you guys approach the game that might be different to how we approach it. I know a lot of the European teams, kind of, you could see that in their list construction. Their lists are very different to kind of a little bit how we build lists over in the UK. So that was really interesting from a gaming highlight. And then just spending a weekend with my mates, like, it was ideal. Traveling to a different country with your friends, doing something that you're all really invested in with other people that are all hugely invested in this hobby, was really, really special.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Matt, what is a highlight for you?
So probably for me was just the variety of players that I played. I think this is the first tournament I've gone to in as far back as I can remember where I did not play somebody that I had played before. I don't think I mean I don't and somebody can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. If it's one of the people that I played is somebody that I played at some point in the past at Articon, but I mean I don't think I played. This was a 6-game tournament. I don't think I played anyone that I had ever played before, and that was great. Not that I don't like the people that I played with in the past, but it's always fun just to kind of meet new people and see new playing styles and different list styles. And I got to play against people from kind of all over Europe, and that was really fun.
And then Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what Devin was talking about, this event very much to me helped destigmatize the whole sweaty, annoying, argumentative, competitive player stereotype. In that it felt like, obviously people were playing very competitively. Sometimes there were disagreements, but it really felt like everyone there was understanding that, this is a game. We're not winning a ton of money from this or anything like that. We're here to have fun. We're here to win. We're here to represent our country, but we're also here to make sure that everybody has a good time. And that's exactly what I felt like the atmosphere of the event was, and I was very appreciative of that.
It's actually kind of ironic that the whole sweaty stereotype, that mantle was taken up not by the wargamers here, but by the field hockey teams that were also in the hotel at the same time.
Now let's get into this, shall we?
Yeah,
Our
so
floor. Oh my God. So what these
that was the
field hockey
thing. Go
players
ahead,
would
yeah.
do is they'd go out, they'd play their games, and then because they didn't want to stink up their rooms, they'd take their extremely sweaty, disgusting shoes and they'd put them outside of the hotel rooms. So whenever you'd get off the elevator on our floor, you'd just get hit by this waft of these disgusting sweaty feet smells, and you'd have to you know, run through Nam to try and get to your hotel room and hide in there. It was
Yeah,
really awful.
it was a thing, and I remember thinking like, look, I'm a competitive wargamer. I know what sweat smells like, but this is too much. and that's saying something.
Okay. Well, Rainier and I dodged that, fortunately. I don't know how we totally missed that.
Yeah,
Very
we did
I
totally
think you
wasn't
guys were on the allocated rooms floor, the one where it was basically only for the Nations Cup people because they had set rooms aside. We were not, and we suffered from that.
Okay, all right. Well, a quick highlight for me. I'm gonna wrap two into one. First of all, I love this is not necessarily restricted to the Nations Cup, but any international team format. Really like John kind of touched on this, like the team aspect of getting to go and like not have to worry about playing against people who you traveled with or people who that you're close with. In the United States, anytime any of us show up to a tournament, it's like, hey, like, how are you doing? And then it's immediately like, I'm a competitor against you. So I love being able to just hang out with the Americans in different settings. But then also, I had a great appreciation for the scheduling of the event in terms of like time allocation. We talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but it felt like the general tone of the tournament was not it didn't feel like anyone was trying to game a clock necessarily. It felt like they gave us ample time to be able to like set up our games and play our games. And I that can be rare at very competitive events that are trying to get so many rounds like back to back to back to back. So I appreciated that we were able to get like I feel like when I was playing against someone, I was able to actually get like their best as opposed to like someone who's very rushing trying to like play like a fanatic. So I personally appreciated that as a consistency throughout the event. And then very quickly, I know I said we were going to just bring up the lists, but to go around, what did everyone play? So I played Thranduil's Halls with an allied contingent of Lake Town. Matt, what did you play?
I played the obligatory and ubiquitous Dragon Emperor list.
Okay. Evan?
I took basically Mordor with the Spider Queen, so three Wraiths, Witch King, Shadow Lord, and a basic Wraith, and then the Spider Queen, and some Black Numenorians and Rhinants.
And
Two of the
no
most
bat.
and no
That,
two of the
controversially.
most original lists that a tournament has ever seen, right there. Rainier,
Oh,
what
we
did
really felt like geniuses when we were making
you
these lists.
Yeah, and you got your shock.
Revolutionizing the
Oh
meta.
gosh, other Europeans have the same list as us. What a shock.
copying American metas, obviously.
Exactly. No, yeah, I took Soladan, Dalmir, and two Corsair captains, kind of like a elite spam kind of.
And Corsairs and Haradrim with them, by the way. It wasn't just those four models.
No, it was those four models last time.
That was it.
Yeah,
Rainier was like
Rainier
700
actually
points
went
down. What?
he went
That's all
0
I
and
need.
6, which I'm sure you're quite surprised by
Yeah, Rainier
with
says
those
it
four
really
models.
nonchalant. Oh, I just had these four heroes, and then at the games he just whoosh like
Yeah,
with his
I was
58
like, what are you
model
talking about?
board,
These two and
throwing
a
it
half
up
hour
the
games, it only took us 15 minutes. Like,
Yeah, the rest of your models deploy as ambushers on the second turn.
exactly, exactly.
And then Devin, you were not fond of your list, but what did you play?
Oh man, I was loving it. Azog, Gulavar, 46 or wait, never mind. Sorry. I ended up playing actually it was a clone of it was a Galadriel, Thorin on Goat, and Biffer leading apparently the wrong troops. So that was no, it's Lothlorien and Iron Hills Dwarves. So
Fair enough. And you just
The excitement in your voice, that, and as you're saying, like all their names, it just went from here to down.
So why didn't you like the list, Evan?
no, it's a really good list. So first
Just
off,
For
Devin just
other
mad
people to
now.
play.
no. So here's the thing. One, when I listened to the Anti-Heroics podcast, they commented that so the list is, from my understanding, Evan got it from Ned, whom got it from Jake Rawson, who originally concocted the version of the list where he had a lot more firepower because the list doesn't have heroic march. It's a bubble army. I don't like playing bubble armies, so I'm not a big fan of like shades or anything like that. I'm a very much sprawling sort of kind of player. And so with bubble armies, it forces you to play very differently in matches like recon or destroy the supplies and I'm not used to playing that way. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, split my army, that's fine, like cool. I can't do that now as effectively. So the list performed well. I mean, well, I guess its original version where it had some Iron Hills crossbows, I think we we're missing that in our list. But the list performed well in England, so I can't say it's a bad list. I think it was just being piloted by a player whose style is not like that. And the guys know, usually I'll go to Articon and I'll be like, yeah, whatever, I'll just take what people don't want. And that's been pretty successful for the most part, year after year. But this year I just found out what I'm really bad at.
I think that's something that's not really talked about enough, probably, playing lists that match your play style. I know people like Dave Farmer in the UK, they like lists with loads of tricks, whereas someone like Ali King has won the league before with less tricksy armies, kind of really relying on really solid battle lines like dwarfs, or kind of Rohan throwing spear spam as well. In terms for me, I took Shade Angmar, slightly different version. I didn't take Gulliver. He's probably one of my favorite models in the game. Instead, I took Birder and 2 captains, so no Barrow-wights, and then had the Witch King sprinkled in and a whole bunch of orcs. That's kind of for a bit more hitting power in the shade bubble, less reliance on rolling a 4-up with the Barrow-wights.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, I'm gonna try my very best to pull up the lists.
Are we reviewing the list? I didn't hear
no, but just to kind of take a very quick look and just offer some of our thoughts looking at them. I will say, so kind of segueing into this as I get it pulled up, it was interesting. So obviously there are competitive consistencies like across the world, right? Obviously Dragon Emperor is popular, is like strong here as it is anywhere else. But it was interesting to see, especially with allies, how like other nations really began to bloom in very differing ways. Especially with some of the good armies, looking at like Team Poland, for example, I thought their good armies were all very creative.
Actually going into, oh, sorry, go right here.
Oh no, I was going to second you, Alisher, too, because when we played Germany and we played Austria, I played back to back the exact same army. And in both conversations, they were saying how like, oh yeah, us in the Germanic countries, this is like the meta and stuff. So again, those weird, interesting like 3 alliance type lists that you wouldn't really think of.
Yeah. All right.
And which one was that, Rainier? Was that the Hobbit elf Gwahir?
Hobbit, Gulliver, and then what's her face? Galadriel with like some fight 6 thrown in there. You get a good 60 models.
Bolivar. Wow, that's impressive.
Well, here it's too late here. Yeah, it looks like I don't know how to play the game. No.
I
60
wish I could
models.
put Gullivar in my Galadriel Hobbit list.
Oh, but it was a good list. But like in both conversations, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I mean, I beat both of them at it, which is nice that I got to play back and back. So the second game was a lot easier. But yeah, it was interesting for them to say that that was like the German meta and the Austrian meta.
So I think, Alice, this format of viewing the list may be a little overwhelming for.
No, so I only have this here in case someone who's watching it on YouTube specifically, wants to pause and take a look at it. I'm going to go away from this in just a very quick moment. I will note, so I feel like of the tournaments that I've been to, there were a lot of layers to how this was constructed. Obviously, we had been talking about the fact that each team was comprised of 6 people. As a part of submitting lists, 2 additional lists were sent as decoy lists, 1 evil, 1 good. So that I think ahead of time really skewed kind of some of what we saw. I'm assuming so the actual intention behind it is that people are able to switch once they see everything, or is that not the intention?
Yeah, so I believe the intent is partly for people to be able to switch, and also so you have some flexibility in terms of if you have a last minute dropout and you need a new player to kind of come in, fill the spot on the team, take something different that they suddenly do or don't have access to models. But I think also, so that's one aspect. The other is the bit of gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. And I know for us originally, at least for a moment, the idea was that we were going to play the last alliance list without any blinding light, but then like looking at the array of lists became pretty apparent that that was going to be important to have.
Actually, fun fact, yeah, the list I played was actually our decoy list.
Yeah.
The copy of Jake Rawson's list we were not supposed to play.
Okay. So I believe and John, correct me if I'm totally off. This is the win rates, correct?
Yeah, so that's the average win rates for each specific army. Like so, combination of good v evil. It doesn't account for how many people played the army. So, for example, after lists were dropped, there was 12 Dragon Emperors and 12 AOLs amongst the team. So you see that reflected a bit in their win rate. So I guess you could argue that the statistical kind of significance is more for the lists that had more players. So AOL's win rate of kind of looks like 55-ish%, and that's with being the joint most common list. Whereas some of the list that has 100% win rate, the Mordor Isengard list, there was only one player that took that combination of allies. So that's not a hugely statistically significant sample, but interesting given the context of kind of our small sample size that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting statistic. I'm looking at Dragon Emperor, which was the list that I took. And which was a list that I think just about, well, actually, tell me if I'm wrong. I know almost everybody had the Dragon Emperor as one of their lists, John, and tell me how many ended up taking the Dragon Emperor. If you've got that on the
I
tip of your
believe it
fingers.
was either 80 or 70%. So either 14 or 18 Dragon Emperors originally. And then, yeah, I think Alistair has pulled up the stats. So we had 12 Dragon Emperors after teams had dropped. I think it might have been 16. It might have been in the middle. It was, yeah, it was 16 because it was 80% of teams. So
yeah,
4 teams dropped a Dragon Emperor. I think 3 teams dropped an AOL.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things that I felt playing the Dragon Emperor was it seemed like I was playing army after army that was like designed to beat the Dragon Emperor. And that seems to be borne out in the statistics there, as far as the win-loss rate.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that my team used in our kind of list decision-making process was I had previously analysed all the lists taken to the Polish team championships, which the GBHL sent a team over, and the Dragon Emperor there was really, really common. But additionally, every team had kind of at least one, normally 2 lists just designed to take on the Dragon Emperor, designed to beat it up. So I think Dragon Emperor was public enemy number 1. The conclusion we came to is that you can tech for it, but it's still not a guaranteed matchup that you're going to beat the Dragon Emperor. It's just so efficient at what it does that it's still just such a good option for teams.
That the Dragon Emperor is traditionally something that good has more tools to deal with than evil does, because good generally has the higher fight and the better defense, better strength troops that make it easier to sort of play the Dragon Emperor's game and do so better. And despite this being a good v evil tournament, so the Dragon Emperor needs to play against good more often. It was still heavily taken, and still, I think it was a slightly less than 50% win rate, which
I
is
believe about
still respectable.
49.
Yeah, still respectable due to the sheer number of people that took it. Very telling.
I'm actually surprised, given the format, that Assault on Lothlorien was only won slightly more than it lost. I feel like Assault on Lothlorien just really works well into the format, especially given that it's a horde, but it's a horde that can kill things well on the outnumbered. I think that really stands out. That's essentially fearless to everything because good doesn't have a definitive ability to cancel things like Fury. That one jumps out to me. But like John said, some of the statistics on here are a little bit skewed. Obviously, Mordor Isengard was only represented once. Rivendell Fellowship was only represented once. So if you really want to have like an in-depth look at it, you will probably have to try to go to the Nations Cup page and look at some of the other detailed statistics to see what actually was represented.
Out of curiosity, again, how many Mordor Harad armies were played?
Let me see. I can pull that back up. Here we go. Mordor Serpent 4.
4. Okay. All right. It was still one of the higher played ones, but obviously nowhere near as ubiquitous as Dragon Emperor. But I was impressed by its 80% win rate.
That the frequency of kind of Mordor Serpent Lord gets split because Mordor is so ubiquitous, and you're kind of splitting hairs whether you want to take Suladan or the Spider Queen. I'd say because it depends where you want to put those matchup strengths more.
And what, just out of curiosity, can you bring me back to the win rate? I'm curious where Mordor Spider Queen was. Let's see.
I had just seen it here.
Oh,
This is
there it is.
So
Yeah.
Dead on 50,
50%. Yeah.
which is interesting. How many of those lists were there? I know there were 3, one of which was mine.
There was 14. Four Mordor Spider Queen.
Right.
14 total Mordors split across the different alliances.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it's the same number of players as Mordor Serpent Horde, but Mordor Serpent Horde won 80% of games, and Mordor Serpent Horde Mordor Spider Queen 150. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in this data. I'll have to like spend some time staring at it and seeing it.
I can send you the raw numbers if you want. A lot of this was very, very rushed by me.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to delve into it at this level. But yeah, that's really interesting. And just out of curiosity, John, who amongst the good teams, who are the standouts as having a combination of like a significant number of teams playing them combined with a high win rate?
A higher win rate. Basically anything that wasn't pure Lothlorien. So Lothlorien allied in with something generally had a pretty good win rate. And then any sort of combination of Battle of the Five Armies. So it didn't have to be all 3, but generally needed Lake Town in there. Lake Town plus allies generally did pretty well.
Yeah.
That survives a Lake Town rather than an army.
That's interesting because I think with maybe like one exception, those were the armies that I played against. Were either a Battle of Five Armies version or some sort of Galadriel and Friends version.
Yeah.
Even my experience with the Lothlorien army, which I'm not even a Lothlorien player, I found the Dragon Emperor to be actually it was very manageable with that army. So
I think our team had, interestingly enough, I think most teams had a solid amount of answers to Dragon Emperor. You played it against it once, Devin. I played
against it twice.
Oh, okay, so we both played against it twice. Me with Randall's Halls, that's at least a solid matchup. You with Lothlorien,
it's a solid matchup.
It's a solid matchup. I think, interestingly enough, Dragon Emperor probably got the worst of like anticipated list building, somewhat because it's more challenging to do that with AOL in the format. I guess one thing as well, so a key difference between a tournament like this and a tournament like Articon is whereas Articon has a rule that named heroes cannot be duplicated, I believe this had a rule that factions cannot be duplicated. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really changed things. So something that's really convenient, like a Lake Town Warband, is only ever going to be seen once.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be seen 6 times, but only once in a given army.
Sure.
Or only once by a given team. Sorry, is what I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that probably makes these charts not even representative of what actually is the meta, just given the fact that everyone had split up. So like if you got these ones all the way on the far right, then those ones probably wouldn't even have been seen potentially.
These are win percentages right here. So, I mean,
you're right. It's not how often they were taken. True.
I think a more important fact to take into account is that this is good versus evil. And these lists are sort of going to vary in success rates because all of the evil lists were tailored with no evil lists in mind whatsoever. And all of the good lists were done with the same thing, but for the good side. So keep in mind that if you expect to take, I don't know, one of the most successful lists from this tournament to a tournament that can be good versus good or evil versus evil, you may have different results.
Yeah, I think this tournament had it like the results of this tournament were very narrowly skewed relative to other events. Like this, you're not going to see the same type of an outcome like from Articon Statistics or really any other big tournament because of this.
Yeah,
It
I
was
think
interesting to see how certain teams really like utilize legendary legions to get around some of the faction restrictions. So like a lot of teams I saw, they would have their designated like allied Lothorian list, but then they would also have like a Defenders of Helm's Deep, for example, to have some additional an additional combination that kind of works similarly. So there were ways to get around it. I think from our perspective, I don't know. Like, given that again, like five of our members were all on Team USA, the the format for list building was really like I thought it was quite wild, especially like when you sign up for a tournament, at least from my perspective, it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'm gonna submit something that like makes sense, like with my play style. And I actually think Thranduil's Halls works quite well in this format, but the traditional like pathway of figuring out what you want to play does not necessarily translate one for one in this format. I don't know what everyone else thinks about it.
yeah, I completely agree. I think looking at the lists that did well, looking at the winning kind of things, it's a lot more useful to look at what tools did they bring and use that moving forward into your singles list building rather than kind of lifting the whole list. And I personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with let listing. I do it all the time, but for this, you definitely want to tweak things rather than go kind of wholeheartedly into what you're using.
So John, I have a question for you. When we were talking there, we had a conversation, and it was clear that you had done an immense amount of planning for the lists for your team going in, to the extent that I think you had like you had like a you had like a spreadsheet that went into like, what everybody said they wanted to be against, what everybody said they didn't want to be for like every list that was there. Tell us a little bit about that, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about that.
Yeah, so I made something similar to what's used. So I've been involved, I haven't actually played, but involved in 40k team tournaments before. And it's really common practice there to make a pairings matrix. So the list document would come out, you would make a spreadsheet for each opposing team, and you'd predict how you think the game's going to go for my list versus, say, all six. In this case, it's all 8 of the opposing team's lists. So that means each player has a list, and they have to do 8 different kind of. No, it's only 4. Sorry, so 4 data entry because it's good versus evil. The complexity with Lord of the Rings is that each mission skews things hugely. Your matchup into Contest of Champions versus any given list is going to be hugely different to your matchup when you play Recon. So what I asked my players to do in England Lions was to predict their score for every different scenario. So in total, that was each player predicting scores against 4 lists across 18 scenarios across 19 teams. So I think it was over 1,300 cells that they had to allocate a number score to, and that was either major win, draw, minor loss, or major loss. Unsurprisingly, the majority of the team didn't fill out all of the spreadsheet. I think it was useful. A lot of the benefit is more just thinking about the matchups, and I'm of the opinion that a prediction made kind of when you're kind of sitting and thinking about it is going to be a higher quality prediction than when you're kind of there at the table and you're rushing, trying to do it in the middle of the draft. The spreadsheet is only as good as the quality of the predictions. I think with our pairings, if all of our predictions had been accurate based on how we paired, we would have won 4 games and drawn 2, which would have seen us do a lot better than we can. But a lot of the times the predictions weren't accurate. And that kind of happened to all members of the team. There was a matchup where I was predicted, I think, a minor win, and I ended up getting spanked and getting a major loss. So I'm guilty of it as well. My predictions weren't foolproof either. but I love looking at the data for it and quite like spreadsheets. So for me, it was a bit of fun. For my teammates, it was a bit of a chore. And I definitely think if I get selected for a team again next year, I'll streamline the process a bit.
I
You
mean,
know, I I I wonder because I mean I came at this from a very different background. The team tournaments that I had done were all historical, and because they were historical, they were all like time period based. So it wasn't a question of like, trying to figure out who's going to play whom. You'd have like, somebody on your team had a particular historical period. Like, you had like the late medieval list, and you knew you were going to play whoever the late medieval guy was on whichever team you ended up slotted against. So it was all kind of pre-done. So I was new to all this, like figure out who you're going to play, drafting stuff. Which I confess I'm kind of split on now, and I'm curious what other people think about this. I mean, in one sense, it was kind of an interesting game within a game, to play. And on the other hand, having like now gone through it, it seemed like there was an awful lot of smoke around that was generated around this that ended up kind of not producing a lot of fire. And at the end of the day, it kind of felt like we had this complex drafting system that, kind of did work and was an equitable way to assign stuff. But I'm not sure that we all wouldn't have been better off just saying, here are the good players, here are your three tables. We're going to randomly assign you an opponent. And then, maybe you can alternate picking which table you want to play on. And and that's it. And I'm, that may have saved some, I mean, it would have saved an awful lot of effort, particularly on your part, John. But
Yeah, definitely.
and would have saved some time, because that was another aspect of this tournament was the days were long. And I just I don't know whether switching to that type of kind of simpler random assignment thing would have changed the nature of the tournament or detracted from it in any way. I'm curious what people's thoughts were.
I
It's
I guess
it's an interesting point. Go ahead, Devin.
no, I mean, I guess I'm only speaking from personal experience here, but when we were doing the matchups, especially my list got talked about a lot about who it was being paired up against. So I mean, because it was like almost every single round, it was considered, and it really actually factored into the game that I ended up playing. Like from my experience, it actually had an impact, and I kind of like looked at it as sort of I don't know. It didn't act in a function of the same veto process that Americans have, as far as like trying to make sure the matchups were always evenly matched, because sometimes we would just send out a sacrificial lamb. But to me, I did see an impact, at least from my perspective. So,
Positive, negative. How do you mean?
I'm sorry.
Positive impact or negative impact? How do you mean?
No, I mean both. I mean, like, let's look at the last round, which is easiest to remember, where we didn't want you fighting a ball rock because we
Yeah.
knew that your odds of winning in the type of matchup was the best, and my list could handle a ball rock quite effectively. So, like, that, okay, we paired me up against that. Like, I think things like that did come up. Like, I mean, we put me on terrain tables where, like, when it was recon, we purposely put me on the one with the big buildings where, okay, I can clog up these narrow lanes, and that would, prove more effective than, in some of the other boards. So, like, I mean, consistently game after game, I mean, even when we had the opponent with the Great Beast, we're like, all right, Devin has a Sentinel and he has Gladriel. Let's go ahead and drive it for him. Like, every game it came up. And so my experience, I don't know if it was the same for you guys, but it definitely was tailored to what was going on. Now, admittedly, I may have got the same matchups with a random roll, given it's a 1/3 chance, but I saw the strategy behind where I was always placed.
No, no, I see what you're talking about, Devin, because it was so many times it wasn't really like, oh, let's put our best player against their best player. A lot of times we would do things like, okay, let's sacrifice one of us to make sure we're going up against their best list. That will most likely be a loss for us, but maybe we have more chances of winning the other departments.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that kind of like meta strategizing. And I do believe next year, if we attend next year, there will be more of that as well. Because of course, this is the first time Team USA has actually done anything like this, I feel, as a group. And in hindsight, yeah, I think we'll be doing more of it actually next
And I
year as
think
well. To
that's
where
a huge point.
yeah,
That's big.
we would be like, okay,
Yeah.
no, it's a tournament, right? Like, okay, like Rainier, like today, this round, we're sacrificing you. You're going up against this list. You have a 5% chance of winning, but you're gonna take out that list, and now we have like a 65% winning against these other three. So yeah, that aspect of the tournament was quite unique. I know the Europeans listening to this are probably like, yeah, that's every single tournament. But for us, it was interesting, because we're all friends and we're like, you're the sacrificial lamb today. You're gonna die. You have to go against this one. And it was like, shoot, but okay, let's do it.
I think
Quick question. This really has, well, John and Evan, since you both were team captain, did the die roll have a like to figure out who was placing a list first, have a noticeable impact on drafting? Like, was there advantage to winning that roll or losing that roll?
But before we do that, could we explain for the listeners who may not be familiar with it how this drafting process worked?
Yes, please. Someone try to remember all of this caps.
40 minutes later.
Yeah, no. Well,
the
it is one of these weird things where the drafting process, I think, takes longer to explain than it did to actually
the
conduct. But
without explaining the actual mechanics, the kind of explanation I've been giving my friends who weren't actually involved in it was, it's like playing two simultaneous games of rock paper scissors, but half the time you can't see what your opponent's putting down. So I want my scissors to play their paper, but they obviously want to avoid that. In terms of actual mechanics, players would roll off. I don't think there was a huge roll off advantage in terms of the draft, but getting to the first pick of the tables was important in some matchups. Team A, whoever won the roll off, would put a list face down. Team B would put another list face down. These would then both be turned up, and then the opposite teams would have to pick a matchup of the opposite alliance, and then teams then kind of carried on a similar, slightly modified process, flipping the alliance of their lists as to what they could put down. So that doesn't really explain the actual mechanics, but hopefully gives the listeners a bit of an idea about the stuff. Evan, if you want to give a better explanation, please be my guest.
I really don't. But be
Honestly, it was
confident in the
confusing if you
fact,
saw it.
yeah, it's basically you put down a list, your opponent puts something face down to face it, while you're also doing the same thing on the other side, and you do that 3 times. And you alternate who does that first based on a die roll at the beginning. Um, Basically, the person who wins the die roll picks a board and puts down the first list, and then the other person does it the second time we do it, and then the third time we do it, the first person does it again. So technically, with the die roll, it is slightly beneficial to win it, because that means you'll have first picks on which board you want to play in twice instead of once. Um, but overall, I didn't find it to be overly impactful, which brings up an interesting topic to discuss, which is that part of the process of the draft is picking boards that you want to play on. Um, and quite often I personally found that ate up a lot of time and didn't necessarily offer the biggest of benefit. Um, And it's an interesting point of comparison because the WTC, what they do is all of the boards are identical. And that makes it obviously much more boring, but it also sort of streamlines that process. Um, and I think perhaps it would make things easier, not necessarily if they did the same thing where they made 4 identical boards, because that's boring, but if they did something to try and maybe streamline the whole board picking process, because that honestly felt like it took the most amount of time, in my opinion.
So a way of doing it that I plan on suggesting to the organisers is that if me and you were the captains, Evan, we would sit down opposite each other. We would do the draft, but just saying okay, this matchup is the first pick of the board. So rather than the captains having to go and place it on the table, you do the draft, sat down, and then say all the ones on this side, that's the first pick, and it goes along like that once everything's drafted. And then at least then the two captains are sitting down, they're doing the card picking process faster. And then hopefully the board picking process is a bit more streamlined, because you have the player knows who's there. They can just go and pick a board. Then you immediately go to the next matchup. You're not doing pick a board, pick a matchup, pick a board, pick a matchup. I think that would be a bit quicker.
I'm imagine the they would still have to get up to look at the boards, right? Or are they just sort of...
Yeah, but they'd do that once the actual draft itself has happened, in my kind of pipe dream version.
Well, then I'm curious of your response to Evan's comment about making the boards just more boring and identical. What is your just thought on that? Or do you think that would take away from the feel of your tournament?
So if I were doing it for a purely competitive point of view, not player enjoyment, not player spectacle, each series of boards would be identical, but the boards would be different amongst
like
a series,
column.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So,
column, yeah.
for example, every group of 6 boards has one really heavy terrain table, one really light table, and then scales in between there, so that there is granularity in terms of what boards you can pick, because I think that adds an interesting tactical element. But it's standardized, so if I'm playing on row 5 this round, I know it's going to be the same as if I play on row 1 or row 10. So that standardizes it, makes the matchups a bit fairer, rather than saying, oh crap, we've got the row of boards that has the lava river on it again, or end up me playing Rivendell Knights with my orc horde trying to cross a river, where I just got Ratha Bruined over and over again. That was a bit unfortunate.
I think terrain standardization is nice as well, because it sort of removes the accidental implementation of problematic boards. So for example, immediately in the tournament, when USA was against Switzerland in the first round, what ended up happening was, Dad, you were playing against a Galadrim player on this very nice looking Goblin Town board. And what ended up happening was, it was Lords of Battle. The Galadrim player decided that his job would be to deploy his entire army on one sort of like
It was a
8
it was a
by
12.
8
Yeah, it was bigger than
elevated
that.
square.
Yeah, it was like a 12-inch by 12-inch platform that was, I think, 8 inches off the table,
Yeah.
with
And
only one ladder up to it.
So you
and
guys were in a
Dad
siege.
decided very intelligently that, seeing as it was Lords of Battle, he would have absolutely nothing to do with these elves. So
Said
he
nope.
sat outside of 24 inches for the entire game. The judge came over. It was declared a draw. And then the Goblin Town board was promptly disassembled and then never used again in the tournament. So it was very clear that in particular was a slight mishap. So standardizing the boards may well help with that situation not occurring again.
Or you could end up, I mean, the downside, I guess, is that you end up with 10 boards that look like that, because they're all standardized. I guess that's one problem with standardized boards, is that you risk multiplying the mistake. But
Yeah. I think the Nations Cup's lucky in that it's got an experienced enough kind of TO cohort that hopefully, if they did standardize stuff, it would be pretty safe.
John, while I have it
Supposedly.
pulled up, do you mind explain? I believe this is the form that you were talking about, the spreadsheet form.
Yeah, so this is my pairings matrix. So you can see on the left, if we'll do my Angmar, for example. You can see my Angmar versus the 3 lists. So originally it was 4, but teams dropped a list that I could have potentially played against, and I've given myself a predicted score out of 5 for my Angmar versus Minas Tirith in every single mission. if you're on the live spreadsheet and you hover over Minas Tirith, it shows you the actual list. So my players didn't have to kind of jump between multiple documents. They only had to fill in 1,300 cells.
Did love spreadsheets. This is impressive.
And then the way that we used this kind of in situ was, say we knew we were playing recon, I'd hide all the other columns and I'd just have the recon column going up, and that would allow me to see, for example, Erebor Lothlorien in recon versus the AOL Mordor and Dragon Emperor. The best situation for us is a 2, so that's a minor loss. However, I know that they're a pretty good list to get bust. And then below that, I can see, right, our Dragon Emperor's got good matchups into everything. Our AOL has good matchups into everything. So the most important pairing that I need to do on the good side is make sure that my Angmar doesn't play the Misty Mountains, Lothlorien and Shire list. Because doing that, if I can avoid that matchup, that should give us 3 wins in Evil. And then we just need to try and get either the Last Alliance into the Dragon Emperor or Minas Tirith into Mordor. So it allows me as the captain and doing the pairings to really quickly see, right, these are the matchups I need to aim for. This is how I can kind of get the round win overall. And it was really useful pairings wise to be able to have all that information like to hand really quickly, especially with the kind of, there wasn't a lot of lead time between when you started the round timer for the draft and when you knew your matchups. So, or sorry, when you knew which team you were paired against. So having all this information to hand, not having to rely on asking my players kind of, oh, do you think this is a good matchup, meant that my draft process was quite streamlined.
Okay.
Again, it's only as useful as the quality of predictions. So,
and just out of curiosity, so these were like the 6 3 good 3 evil and lists that you anticipated were going to be the most popular?
No, so this was specific for each team. So I had this
I
basically
see. It says
page
Austria.
made for 19
Okay.
or 19 other teams. So
Wow.
there was
Okay.
one made
That's a
for the
lot.
USA,
Okay.
but only I filled in my stuff, and then one player on the good side filled in theirs, and then no one else filled it in for the USA. So luckily we didn't play you guys.
Darn, we should have played against
That's how we would have
fully
won.
unprepared.
Yeah.
No, they just knew that they're way better
Well,
than us. They wouldn't have
Austria is first alphabetically, so that's the one everyone did first and then got
Okay.
bored. Whereas you guys are last alphabetically. So
Like, oh, this is really cool. We'll have like super be well prepared. No, after a while, it just gets boring. Okay. Okay. So I don't know if you guys have anything else you kind of want to add to the overall experience. I do have, I at first, for whatever reason, I thought this was all 8. These are the 6 that actually were represented for anyone who's watching, if you want to take a look at that. So John, overall, so your team was comprised of Angmar, AOL, Dragon Emperor, Last Alliance, Erebor, Lothlorien, and Minas Tirith.
yeah.
So in terms of, because I mean, I find the statistics that you have all prepared very interesting. What like went right in preparation? What went wrong for you guys in preparation? So first of all, were your list choices all strategic, or was it a situation where someone was like, I only play Minas Tirith, so I'm playing Minas Tirith?
Yeah, so we had one player who was dead set on Minas Tirith. We had one player who's very experienced with Dragon Emperor and AOL. So he was locked into playing one of those two. And we were locked in on Minas Tirith. So that was kind of one list on each side locked in. We knew we wanted to take Dragon Emperor and AOL. So that locked the second list in for the evil. And then we knew we wanted something based around the Witch King. We initially wanted Barn Door, so that's what some of us in the UK call the Mordor Serpent Horde combo. And then I was umming and ahhing between that and Spider Queen. We actually...
By the way, John, I'm just going to interrupt for a second.
Yep, no worries.
You really threw us you flummoxed us with that barn door thing. Because at one point we're looking up at the webpage, and I can't remember if we thought we were going to play you or we thought there was somebody else who used that term. Oh, it was the Hussars that used barn door. And we looked at that and we were like, what the heck is that? And we had to look up the list. But all right, so now we know what it means. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
We actually elected not to take the kind of base Black Numenorian line. We thought there was going to be a hell of a lot of kind of dwarfs and elves about, so the terror would be less useful with the Black Nuns. We were worried about the longevity of the list. So the Spider Queen's a glass cannon. She's hell of a cannon, but very fragile. The Wraiths can run out of will. We thought the games were going to go long and a lot of turns were going to be played. So we wanted to be less reliant on kind of Wraiths. In hindsight, knowing what we know now, I think that was an unfounded fear. We could definitely have taken either Mordor Serpent Horde or Mordor Spider Queen. I think I probably would have done the same decision that you guys ended up on and taken Mordor Spider Queen. I think that list is less of a take all comers list, but it's more specialized. It's a better scalpel. The Spider Queen can win games on her own, whereas Suladan, as efficient as he is, can't really win on his own. He can just make you really good at grinding out. So I think the Angmar performed fairly well, but not fantastically. I think there was a lot more shooting than we anticipated a lot of shooting, but I don't think we really reflected that in our list building. We should have taken the Shadow Lord, I think. So we had 2 anti-shooting evil lists. On the good side, I think Last Alliance, I think we were pretty happy with. We were happy with the Erebor Loth. Our Erebor Loth player performed really well. The Minas Tirith, I think we tried to build a Horde style Minas Tirith, and I think we may have got that a little bit wrong. I don't think our list was optimized, and we probably should have gone with something a bit more traditional like Boromir and Bolt Throwers, which we saw a lot of teams taking. We probably missed a trick with Battle of the Five Armies as well. I think we were quite worried about how it would go into Mordor Serpent Horde. But I think the stats and the win rate show that was maybe an unfounded worry. And we probably should have taken that in hindsight over Minas Tirith.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know for us, I feel like, I don't know, anyone's free to chime in. I feel like our evil choices were solid. I think we could have probably been a little bit more strategic with our good picks, especially in that Devin could have, like, I think if Devin, for example, had the Hobbit, Lothlorien, Gwahir list, you probably would have liked that a whole lot more, Devin.
I mean, I've played Hobbits for like 15 years.
I know.
It's
So
kind of
I
my
think overall, I think we did pretty well with our lists, but I think we definitely could have tweaked our good lists a little bit more to set ourselves up for success. Um, but
Well, we kind of were locked in on some obvious choices. Like I think Evan's choice was fairly obvious. Rainier's was obvious.
yeah, I think our
And
evil choices, like even just now looking at the matrix of choices, I think the evil choices all made quite a bit of sense.
I think even for Matt, like his choice was pretty much locked in. I was practically non-participatory until the last day, so I don't know what the
No,
strategy.
this is actually true. That's not a joke. All kind of messaging around. Does anyone know what Devin's playing?
Yeah, what ended up happening is everybody else had their lists, and like 1 or 2 days before the actual thing, I basically had to like call Devin, and we just like I think you were driving at the time, and we just had like a 2 hour chat about what we wanted your list to be because we had done nothing about them
To
so
be
far.
fair, most of the I guess next year I would definitely do a lot more participation because to me we do so many team events at Articon, and what I pick doesn't matter. Like it's kind of like it's not impacting you guys. It's like,
Yeah,
hey,
we
Devin,
we
get at
we
least 4
moved
wins.
from we moved from top 4 being relevant at Articon, like
Yeah,
because at Articon, if you're not doing well, then
it doesn't matter.
only 4 people need to do
Yeah,
well to actually make the team do well. Um, in this event, everybody needs to carry their weight.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I mean, in general, I was okay with the lists as the captain. I would have liked to try and fit AOL into the roster. I think the ideal evil roster is Emperor, AOL, and the list I took, Mordor, Spider
Yeah,
Queen.
I agree with you, Evan.
The issue is Rainier, A, doesn't have the models, and B, from my assumption, you don't really want to play AOL
Well,
at all.
Rainier
Well,
said he
He's
would
bad
play
at the
it.
game. Yeah, he's just
Yeah,
bad at the game. He's not
well,
very.
I needed my
wait a
coach.
second, Rainier, what was your record?
No. That's
Official
I'm not
record or
I am
non-official
not I am
record?
not saying that him taking Corsairs is bad.
I got
Rainier did very
five
well
wins
at
and
this
one loss.
event.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, look, setting aside what the ideal, I mean, we came up with a near ideal result for Rainier. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
I actually
I'm-
think Corsairs was an X factor for the team because, as you can see, Corsairs are no less competitive today than they really ever have been, especially in this format. And because so many people were AOL focused, I feel like Corsairs kind of just slid in really nicely.
And it was okay too in our strategy because I know we put Corsairs down first a couple times, and it really put the other team for a loop because it was like the Corsairs could match most of their lists, right? So in a sense it was nice. But I do agree with you, AOL is more competitive on paper.
yeah, I mean, one
Oh,
interesting aspect of these tournaments, though, is there's what's competitive on paper, and then there's what's competitive, giving that everybody is preparing for what's competitive
Yeah.
on paper,
and
right?
there's play style too. So I like I think it was the first or second game where you guys you Evan were like, okay, I think you should go against this all mounted hero list with like only 20 models or something. And I was like, do not put me against that. Because my playstyle, right? Like on paper, like, okay, it's good. You could break it or like make it go. But like for me, I preferred the hordes more. When I went up against 60 models to my 58, that was a better matchup for our opponent. But for me, it made me more comfortable. So again, it is like that. Okay, not just your list build, but your play style, who it is, and also what you feel comfortable playing against.
And that's really, really valuable in teams as well. If you can flip those matchups where on paper it looks like this should be a bad matchup for you, but your play style lends itself to be able to flip that matchup, that's huge because you can catch the other team out, get wins that they weren't expecting you to get, and then win the round.
Yeah, because I think what was it? I went against a lake town, like the Battle of the Five Armies won the first round. And like I went up again, I was like, ooh, good, like that's good. Like I made a little like, yeah. And my opponent was like, what? You're excited? Why are you excited about this? Just because my play style, it like made it easier for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's
think
there's something to
I
be
think
said for. Go
counting
ahead.
for the players and the play styles that we brought into, I think our evil side, all of the evil players were playing the armies that they were best with and comfortable with. All of the armies were very strong. Um, and I think that reflected in the results too, because all of our evil players um, had at least 3 wins. And I think we all had a technically positive record. I'm not 100% sure on how
I've
we
got
all
the
did,
win
but I
rate
think we
stats
did
if you
quite
like them.
well.
nah, we don't need to see that shit.
So I mean, I think I was the worst of the evil players, and I had a major win, two minor wins, that weird draw from the first round, and then two minor losses.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess what I was feeling is, I almost was wondering after playing those games whether taking the Dragon Emperor was the right answer in this particular tournament, given that everybody was waiting for it.
But it's what you're so practiced with. I
Yeah,
I
mean,
mean,
and
yeah, that's
even
true.
that you did well because we saw the Dragon Emperor got what 50% win ratio and you got above that. So in a sense, you did do better than like the typical Dragon
even
Emperor.
John's team did the same thing. John's team recognized, hey, you are the most practiced with this army. So regardless of who's teching against it, you should play that.
Yeah, but I wonder if the question is that, look, if everybody's teching against the Dragon Emperor, don't bring the Dragon Emperor.
So what we thought, sorry to butt in, we thought that even when people are doing that, we don't think there's anything that counters it consistently enough for that to be a worry. And it looks like I was looking at how you built your Dragon Emperor. Looks like you did something similar to us. You didn't put a captain in, you didn't put a Dragon Knight in, just went the three main heroes. And we did the same because we felt that putting in the heroes, the extra guys, can give you some utility. That march allowing you to move 12 is good. Dragon Knights getting extra dudes is good, but it makes the list vulnerable in certain missions. So suddenly assassination, if Legolas can just snipe out a no fate Dragon Knight, that's huge. So I think you can build the Dragon Emperor in such a way that it does just become even more of a roadblock. And 46 D6 fight 5 guys is wild.
It's fair.
I
guess that's
still
fair.
I think the right choice is to just play what best, especially if you have a lot of practice with it. So and yeah, and all of that about the Dragon Emperor is practically has nothing really that counters it, but yeah. Well, then I guess Alice, or you had anything else for this?
Yeah, so I wanted to quickly bring up, and if you don't have something, don't feel like you have to have something. But in terms of some of the more unique lists, were any of you guys surprised by any of the lists at the tournament? So, like for me personally, and I think this will actually affect some of my list building and play style, at least in the immediate future. Some of the I think it was Team Poland. It was their bluff list, which I know in any heroics you guys talked about it. But the double dwarf king with like Kazagard spam allied into uh Rivendell with Glorfindel and Kieran was like I thought that was brilliant. So like seeing some of that actually all three of the Polish armies for good I thought were just really uniquely brilliant. Do any of you guys have anything, whether you played against it or you just saw it, where you just were really intrigued by the construct of the list?
So I've got two. It's what the first is kind of cheating. It's just the general idea of the way the kind of mainland Europeans build their lists. They build them to eke out the really small, tight wins. They're very shooting heavy. They know they're not going to get a huge amounts of turns in. So they build them to pick out that one leader wound, that kind of small, narrow win. And you see that reflect in their list. They bring lots of shooting, lots of kind of scalpely type things that can just reach out and take out a banner, take out a leader wound. So that's the kind of list concept that I found really interesting. My absolute favorite list, and I thought this was a meme list going into the tournament, was one of the lists that won all of its games, and that was the Belgian Saruman the White, Witch King on Fell Beast, Great Beast list. And
I loved that list. I played against it.
It's so cool.
I was going to use that one as my list. I've never seen that.
Sorry, Devin.
No, hey, you know what? I'm glad to join in with someone else who saw that, because when I saw him play it, I honestly thought he was going to be like maybe not a good player, because I'm like, he's playing a Great Beast. I've never seen that in competitive play. And maybe that's just over in America, maybe over here it's great. But I mean, it was a really cool list to fight against. And I loved it. I'm like, wow, this is actually a really cool way to play the Great Beast. So that was my pick. Yep.
So I mean, what was his shtick with the list? I'm curious to see kind of like I mean, I understand the, you sorceress blast into the Great Beast when like 6 people have charged the thing, but how did the Witch King figure into the mix with that?
So, okay, I think then maybe there were 2 Great Beast lists. He didn't have the Witch King. My guy had Saruman and the Great Beast, not the Witch King. Sorry. Okay. So maybe there's 2 Great Beast lists.
Yeah, there was. Did he have the Suladan as well?
He had Suladan. Yes.
Suladan and Mouth of Sauron. Yeah.
Did he have another Wraith? No, he had the Mouth of Sauron. You're right. So my guy did not have the Witch King. So maybe there's a slight variance here. So I guess the list you were talking about, John, had the Witch King instead of Suladan and the Mouth.
Yeah, so I think the logic with the Witch King is it's another really powerful compeller. On a Fell Beast, you've got 24-inch threat range combined with Saruman's 28-inch threat range, so you can keep them back safe. But also, the Fell Beast can hurl into the Great Beast's combat and knocks everything prone again. So it's a way of doing it. If you win priority and you've gone first, you can then you can still get that same effect. You can call a heroic combat with the Witch King. Saruman's the leader, so you can be fairly reckless with your Witch King. But yeah, it's such a cool list. It's clearly been successful, and I desperately want to play it. And I've put a Great Beast on my wish list. So
actually, that list actually sounds really cool as well. I did not play that variation of it, mine it's Soledad one. I think there's a little more tricks in that list, which is a lot more my style. So I really actually think that would be a cool add. I imagine the numbers wouldn't decrease much given you've lost Soledad and Mouth. So
Yeah, so I think the version you played against had 41 models, whereas the Isengard Mordor one has 38.
okay, then that probably would have actually been more effective against me. The one you described, because it was actually an extremely tight game that came down to a judge ruling on who won. But I think if a Witch King on Felbeast was in that, it would have caused some serious problems. I didn't get to see the infamous Sorcerer's Blast into the Great Beast because I had a Sentinel and Galadriel, so I just kind of moved the model for him most of the game. But but yeah, it's I think that pretty much though what John described is a lot more like tricky. So
Just to clarify, compelling the rider, because we've had people comment in the past saying you cannot compel a great beast. No, it was the rider who he was testing.
yeah, I was casting on the rider.
Because that Belgium had the one configuration, and then Belgium 2 had the other configuration. I actually wonder if that's like part of their meta, given that it was like represented twice, but only for that country.
I mean, they seem to be doing well with the Great Beast if they wanted both their teams to play with it.
I know. So that's actually very, very interesting. But does anyone else have a list that you either just saw or played against that you thought was interesting or creative in some way, shape, or form?
So the one that stuck in my mind, this was another Polish list, was the Lothlorien fiefdoms Rohan list. I mean the Rohan portion of it was Theodred and some Cav, so that wasn't, I mean that just added some Cav, but the real painful part of it was this basically he'd used it, so he had Galadriel, so Galadriel was there to shut down Rutabi, which is if you run into a caster like Gandalf or Galadriel, but what your opponent usually does is just continually cast Transfix on Rutabi, who then basically doesn't play the game because her two will end up gone, and then she just stays stationary the rest of the game. But he'd constructed basically a pike block that had the clansmen of Lamadon, the two-handed guys in the front rank, and then a rank of the fiefdoms men at arms, or fiefdoms men at arms, and then a third rank of guard of Galadrin court. So it was essentially a fight 6 pike block with a two-handed guy in front, where the two-handed guy, if that pike block lost the fight, the clansman was probably dead, because he was trapped. But if it won the fight, my guy was probably dead, because there was a two-handed strike coming in, and I remember our battle lines hit, and it ended up being largely a battle line to battle line thing, and his battle line just like tore through mine, and that was really eye-opening from the perspective of Dragon Emperor list. That's not something you usually see, is like your battle line goes into his battle line and like 6 of your guys go down, and it's like ugh. That was a pretty scary revelation to see.
Just so you know, Alistair, I only will probably have about 10 more minutes before I may have to drop off. But
Okay, fair enough. Well, does anyone else? So Evan, Rainier, do you have? It's just you guys at this point.
No, I think I went through the basic that you would typically see with alliances. Besides that, I guess maybe it's like a European meta, but the Gwahir, Hobbits, and Galadriel with Fountain Court. That was interesting. I think again the more interesting thing was that like I saw multiple teams playing it, and the list that they played was the exact same down to the model. So yeah, besides that, I saw typical stuff.
Yeah, I I don't know if I really have a specific list to talk about, but just speaking as sort of like a chronic list writer who every once in a while will go on sprees where he writes like 10 lists in a session or something like that. Um, it's so interesting to see like some of my more experimental ideas, like other people thought of them and actually like use them at events. Um, and there's a ton of ideas that I had never even thought of that people are using. Like for example, Devin, the Polish man you played on the second round with his Mordor Suladan lists with Shelob in it, I thought was very interesting because Shelob almost acts as like a mini, slightly worse Spider Queen. Um, and especially with all of the ring wraith support, she can actually function very similarly to that. Um,
I would be
and just
curious if he
thinking
would have
through,
taken that if his other ally didn't have the actual Spider Queen.
well, that would have been problematic because then you can't take Suladan, right? So it's a way to both take Suladan and the Spider and a Spider Queen-esque model in a list. Um, so I found that innovation quite interesting, and I think I'm actually going to try it out soon, see if it has merit for my play style.
Just don't put in a bat swarm.
No bats more.
Well,
And
that's the great part about it. I literally
not
can't
allowed
because
to.
Mordor and Serpent Horde.
There you go.
I guess in that ally though, Evan, you also retain your pure bonus, which is not nothing.
Yeah, I actually find the pure bonus very useful, and it's one of the most painful things about taking Mordor Spider Queen is I lose my +1 courage and I lose my reroll ones.
Fair enough. Yeah, but to Matt, so wrapping up, but to Matt, what you were saying against the Lothlorien fiefdom Rohan, like from this, something that I've now only tested once, but I think is absolutely hilarious, is a front line of Iron Guard backed with Lothlorien Pike support. I've played it once, and the concept of that is just so funny on a tabletop. It like if you win, you have 4 dice, 2 of which are strength 4, to just blow up whatever's in front of it. So that is definitely the Lothlorien allied into the dwarves really like. I don't know what clicked with that or the idea of elves and Khazad-dûm specifically, but I'm very excited to try that out more. But in any case, that is largely the wrap up to this episode. This has been a really lovely conversation. John, thank you so much for coming over here from the Any Heroics podcast, which you can also find
Thank you so much for having me.
on what platforms is obviously YouTube, but what else?
Yeah, so we're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We try and post in the various Facebook groups when the podcast comes out. We also do battle reports on YouTube. We'll try and post those in the Facebook groups as well.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you, everyone, for participating in it. And to those watching, we will see you in the next episode.